It was 9:42 a.m. on a Tuesday when the cops showed up with their lights blaring like it was a hostage situation and not, as it happened, a man fixing 3 busted roof tiles in his own dang house. I was up there, sweating under the July sun, holding a hammer in one hand and a tube of sealant in the other, when the first cruiser screeched to a stop. A second pulled up behind it like I'd just stolen the Hope Diamond and decided to hide out in suburbia. Then came the voice. "Sir, step down from the roof. Now." I turned, confused, squinting into the glare. Down below, Officer Mustache, my nickname, not his badge name, had one hand hovering near his holster, the other gripping a bullhorn. His partner was already halfway out of the car, scanning the yard like I had a hostage up here under the shingles. "What?" I shouted back. "I live here." "That remains to be determined, sir." "Step down." And there she was, on the sidewalk, sipping iced coffee like she was watching a matinee performance. Karen. My next-door neighbor. Short blonde bob, giant sunglasses, holding a tiny dog that looked like a powdered donut with legs. She was grinning. "This man is not allowed on that roof," she told the officer, waving one perfectly manicured hand like a game show hostess revealing a shiny new car. "It's a code violation." I told him. He didn't listen. I nearly dropped the hammer. I'd dealt with this woman before. Anyone who's ever lived in a neighborhood like mine knows a Karen. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was a menace wrapped in yoga pants, fueled by unsweetened oat milk lattes and an unholy devotion to the homeowners association. This was the same lady who reported my trash bins once for being too close to the curb, and who called animal control on my cat because she said he looked suspicious. And now she'd called the cops on me, for fixing my own roof. I climbed down the ladder slowly, half expecting to get cuffed before I reached the second rung. When I hit the grass, Officer Mustache stepped forward. "Can I see some ID, sir?" "In my wallet." "Inside." "In my kitchen drawer. Where I keep my hot sauce and unpaid HOA fines." He didn't laugh. Karen, meanwhile, was fake consoling her dog. "Oh, Muffin, it's okay. The dangerous man is coming down." "Shoo." I led the officer inside, showed him my ID, my name on the mortgage, even a picture of me next to the house at Halloween dressed as Bob Ross. He grunted. "Looks like this checks out. We'll file a report." "A report? For what?" "Disturbance call," he said. "We have to file it when we respond." I opened my mouth to argue, but he was already turning back to the door. When I stepped outside again, Karen was gone. Not even a puff of iced coffee steam left in her wake. And that's when I knew, this wasn't going to end today. See, I thought this would be a one-time incident. A misunderstanding. A neighbor with too much time and too little sense. But I underestimated two things, her ability to escalate, and her obsession with rules that don't exist. Because later that afternoon, an envelope was taped to my front door. It was from the HOA, of course. Hand-delivered, no postage. Inside was a printed letter that read, "Dear homeowner. You are in violation of Community Code April 7, 13, unauthorized roofing activity. A fine of $500 will be assessed if the issue is not resolved within 48 hours. Sincerely, HOA Compliance Committee." There was no code April 7, 13 in our handbook. I knew, I checked. Twice. Highlighted every section. The closest thing was April 7, 12, which said roof repairs were allowed with reasonable notice. I gave notice. I even emailed the HOA 2 days before, saying I'd be replacing a few tiles. No reply. But suddenly, Karen's best friend is the HOA secretary, and voila, violations for days. I felt like I was living inside a sitcom episode. The kind where the main character gets slowly gaslit by the neighborhood until they snap and scream into the void. I told myself I'd play it cool. No need to overreact. Maybe I'd talk to Karen, explain what was going on. Maybe she didn't realize how insane this looked from the outside. So I marched over, knocked on her door. She opened it like she'd been waiting for me, wearing a visor, a neck fan, and a smug little smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Hey, Karen. I just wanted to clear the air. I wasn't doing anything illegal this morning, just patching some tiles. They were damaged in the last storm, Anne." "I know what you were doing," she interrupted. "And I reported it. It's my civic duty." "Civic, Karen, you called 911 on me. Do you understand how nuts that sounds?" Her smile didn't even twitch. "You're a danger to the neighborhood. You don't follow procedure. You climb on your roof like it's the Wild West. I won't stand by and let this community fall apart. This isn't The Walking Dead. It's a cul-de-sac." Her eyes narrowed. "You're escalating." "I'm escalating?" I laughed. "Lady, you brought cops to my door because I own a ladder. You're being hostile," she snapped. "Leave my property or I'll call them again." I did leave, but not before catching a glimpse of her backyard, which, I kid you not, had a brand new gazebo. No permit. No HOA approval sticker. Just smug audacity. Back at my place, I stared at the notice again. And I started to wonder, was she bluffing? Was this real? Because if it wasn't, if Karen had fabricated a code violation and abused her position to do it, then I wasn't just dealing with an annoying neighbor. I was dealing with someone willing to bend the system to her will. I decided to talk to a few other neighbors. A casual walk. A friendly chat. And something strange happened. Two of them laughed when I mentioned the roof thing. "Oh, she got you too?" said one. "She reported me for planting tomatoes. Said it looked too agricultural." Another told me she once fined a guy for having a flag that was too large and visually aggressive. That's when it clicked, I wasn't her first target. I was just the latest one dumb enough to try to fix something without her royal blessing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I was trying to figure out what made someone like that tick. The type of person who polices patio furniture and owns a whistle labeled HOA emergency. What does she get out of it? Control? Power? The thrill of ruining a Tuesday? I kept thinking about the cop's face, how serious he'd been. How easy it was for someone like Karen to spin a story and make it real. And how close I'd come to getting arrested on my own lawn for holding a caulk gun. And in that moment, I realized, this wasn't about roof tiles. Not really. This was about a woman who saw herself as the guardian of the neighborhood, the unchallenged empress of vinyl-sided order. And the moment someone did something she didn't approve of, she launched a full-blown suburban assault. So I decided I wouldn't just let it slide. But I also knew better than to confront her directly again. People like Karen don't back down from facts or reason. They double down. They escalate. They weaponize rules like it's Call of Duty. If I wanted to stop this, I needed to play her game, but better. I needed to know the rules. All of them. And I needed to find the cracks in her armor. Because if Karen wanted a suburban war, she just picked the wrong guy to mess with. And I had a hammer. The next morning, my mailbox was stuffed with an envelope that practically reeked of passive aggression. No stamp. Just a printed label that said, Community Compliance Notice, in bold red letters, which is Suburban 4, We Hate Fun. Inside was a letter from the HOA, citing me, again, for unauthorized roof work, now labeled a Category B infraction. No idea what that meant, but it sure sounded expensive. They'd tacked on a fine, $500, payable within 10 business days. Or what? Would they confiscate my chimney? There was something else inside too, a photograph. A grainy, zoomed-in shot of me on my roof mid-hammer swing. Clearly taken from Karen's upstairs window, likely with a camera that had way too many unnecessary zoom levels. The audacity was impressive. I called the HOA office number listed on the letter. Straight to voicemail. So I drove down to the community clubhouse, which doubled as the HOA headquarters and tripled as a yoga space on Thursdays. I found a woman named Cheryl behind the front desk, wearing a name tag and a sweatshirt that said "Bless this mess." She looked like the kind of person who smiled while writing someone a parking ticket. "Hi, I'm here about this notice I received," I said, handing her the envelope. "Oh, roof violation?" she asked brightly, like it was a casual question about the weather. "Yeah, about that, I gave notice ahead of time. Just a small repair, no major construction." She typed something into her computer, clicking with way too much enthusiasm. Our records show the work wasn't approved by the committee. "There is no committee approval needed for minor repairs," I said, trying not to raise my voice. "I checked. I even emailed 2 days before." "Oh, we've updated the bylaws recently," she said, as if that explained everything. "It's all part of Karen's new neighborhood order initiative." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Karen brought it up at the last HOA board meeting. Something about visual uniformity and preventing spontaneous DIY disasters. It passed unanimously. Who was at the meeting? Karen, Linda, Bob. Karen again as proxy for Marlene. "Let me guess," I said, rubbing my temples, "Karen's the president now?" "Oh, no," Cheryl said with a too sweet smile. "She's the interim president." "Right. Because nothing screams democracy like electing yourself into power because the last guy moved to Florida." I left the office half dazed, half infuriated, and went straight home. The first thing I did was pull out the HOA rulebook from under my sink where I kept all things cursed. I flipped through it like a lawyer on deadline. The words were mostly the same, but sure enough, tucked between sections about acceptable mailbox height and pet leash lengths was a brand new clause. Clause 6.4.7, all structural repairs, cosmetic or otherwise, must be cleared by the HOA board prior to commencement. Emergency exemptions subject to review. Emergency exemptions. Review. All written in vague, loophole-loaded language. Karen language. I sat back, staring at the rulebook like it had personally betrayed me. Because technically, by this new clause, I was now in violation. But here's the kicker, when I checked the date of implementation, it was 1 day after I'd started the repair. They'd backdated the citation. Karen had pushed through a rule, and then retroactively fined me for breaking it. This wasn't about the roof. This was about control. About sending a message. The message being, you do not make decisions in this neighborhood unless Karen blesses them first. I needed to talk to someone who understood this turf war better than I did. That's when I remembered Ron, the retired Marine who lived 3 doors down. If anyone had survived a neighborhood dispute and lived to tell the tale, it was him. His lawn was pristine, his house always perfectly painted, and yet he never attended a single HOA meeting. That had to mean something. He greeted me with a grunt and a cup of black coffee. "She got you too?" he asked before I even opened my mouth. I nodded. "Roof tiles. Rookie move. You've had run-ins with her?" "Last year she tried to fine me for having an American flag that wasn't aesthetically appropriate. Said it clashed with her lilac shutters." "What did you do?" He sipped his coffee like a man who had seen things. "I ignored her." "And it worked?" "No. She doubled the fine." I leaned back on his porch chair, defeated. "She knows how to work the system," Ron said. "Makes up rules, cites bylaws that nobody reads, uses her little inner circle to pass amendments that only benefit her. She's not enforcing the law, she's writing it." He wasn't wrong. Karen had turned the HOA into her personal game of Monopoly, and every house that wasn't Park Place was fair game for demolition. So what do I do? I asked. He gave me a long look. Play smarter. Document everything. And don't go to war until you know how she's winning hers. I went home and did something I never thought I'd do. I read the entire HOA handbook. Cover to cover. I annotated margins, highlighted clauses, created a spreadsheet. I knew more about community zoning than I ever wanted to. And buried in the tedium, I found something odd. There was a clause, 3.3.1, that stated, all board member actions must be reviewed and ratified by no fewer than 3 community members not currently serving on the board. But every amendment Karen had enforced, every fine she'd issued, had come through without mention of that review. No signatures. No community ratification. Just her and her loyal henchpeople rubber stamping whatever she felt like enforcing that week. This was it. The crack. Karen had been operating unchecked, issuing fines and changing rules under the guise of authority she didn't technically have. The community trusted her because she said things confidently, printed them on nice paper, and sounded like she'd read the whole HOA manual in her sleep. But legally? Her position was shaky. And then came the second letter. This one was a final notice. It said I now owed $750, due to non-compliance. If not paid, further steps would be taken, including a lien on the property. That was it. The moment. The line crossed. A lien? Over roof tiles? This wasn't just a vendetta. It was an attempted financial shakedown. I stood there in my kitchen, clutching the paper like it might catch fire in my hands. A storm was rolling in outside, dark clouds gathering low above the neighborhood like nature itself was fed up with this nonsense. And somewhere, behind one of those manicured hedges, Karen was sipping her tea, probably feeling smug. Maybe even satisfied. But she'd made one mistake. She'd assumed I wouldn't fight back. She thought I'd fold like the others, pay the fine, bow to the crown of HOA tyranny. But I'd learned her game. I'd read her playbook. And more importantly, I'd found a rule she didn't follow. So I sat down, fired up my laptop, and started typing. Not rage. Not threats. Facts. Receipts. The truth. Because the HOA war had begun. And this time, Karen wasn't the only one holding the rulebook. I tried to be nice. I tried to be reasonable, polite, adult, whatever label you want to slap on the effort of not losing your mind while your life is being pecked apart by someone armed with printer paper and a personal grudge. I even wrote a letter to the HOA board. A nice one. It had bullet points. It referenced bylaws. It used words like respectfully and clarification. I attached pictures of the roof before and after. You could practically hear the smile in the wording. I never heard back. Instead, I got another fine. This one for failure to comply with structural standards. The envelope was the same off-white color as the last two. I was beginning to develop a Pavlovian twitch whenever I saw it. What followed was a week-long sequence of minor humiliations. A note taped to my trash bin saying they'd been placed at a visually disruptive angle. A bright yellow sticker on my mailbox warning it was due for paint. And, my personal favorite, a citation for excessive lawn edge overlap, which I can only assume meant my grass grew a half-inch over the concrete. Karen was systematically attacking every square foot of my existence. She wasn't content with the roof. Now she was targeting my life in slow, paper-cut slices. I tried to talk to the HOA board directly, again. I showed up at the next community meeting, dressed like I was about to argue a Supreme Court case. Clipboard. Photos. A highlighted binder. I even brought muffins. Karen, naturally, was seated at the front like she owned the oxygen in the room. "Let's begin," she announced, tapping a gavel against a folding table like she was Judge Judy. "First on the agenda, unresolved violations." I raised my hand. "Hi, yes, that's me. I'd like to appeal the citations and—" "Sir," she cut in, voice syrupy sweet, "you'll need to file a formal appeal in writing to the compliance subcommittee." "And who's on that subcommittee?" She blinked. "I am. Along with Cheryl and Bob. The same Cheryl who smiled like she'd tossed people before. And Bob, the guy who once got fined for having a charcoal grill but now clung to Karen's side like a grateful rescue puppy." "Great," I said. "So I'll be appealing to you." "That's how our community maintains its integrity," Karen replied, smiling like a fox in charge of a henhouse. "We trust our elected board." "I thought this board was temporary." "Oh, we ratified our roles last month," she said, tapping the meeting notes. "Unanimous decision." I glanced at the notes. It was a single sheet of paper with 3 names and 4 bullet points. All typed in Comic Sans. I didn't say a word. Didn't flip the table. Didn't scream about corruption or kangaroo courts. I just left. Quietly. Calmly. Because screaming at a tornado doesn't stop the wind. And besides, I had a better plan. I called an old college buddy, Tom. Tom was a civil litigation attorney. He once sued a vending machine company for a crushed granola bar and won. If anyone could unravel this HOA web legally, it was him. Tom spent one afternoon reviewing the documents, the citations, the ratified notes, and shook his head the entire time. "This isn't an HOA," he said finally. "This is a dictatorship with annual bake sales. She's retroactively enforcing new bylaws. Is that even allowed?" "Not without member ratification," Tom said. "Which she didn't get." "You've got a good case. But it's not like I can take her to court. That just escalates everything." Tom grinned. "Then don't take her to court. Let her hang herself by her own policy." I knew what he meant. The trick wasn't to confront her head-on. It was to let her become so drunk on power that she started tripping over her own rules. And she was already teetering. I started documenting everything. Every letter, every violation, every snide remark made at the mailbox. I kept a log. Dates, times, locations. I had photos of the gazebo she'd installed without permits. Screenshots of her blocking dissenters from the HOA email thread. Copies of her using the community maintenance fund to install a fountain in her front yard for curb appeal testing. But while I was collecting evidence, she was still on offense. 2 weeks after the HOA meeting, I came home to find a bright orange tag hanging from my door. It read, "Notice of Lien Initiation." I stood on my porch staring at it like it might explode. The notice claimed I now owed $1,050 in unpaid fines, and the HOA was, within its rights, to place a lien on my home if the amount wasn't paid in full within 14 days. It felt like a punch to the gut. A lien meant legal headaches. Financial complications. Even the risk of affecting my credit. All because I replaced a few shingles and didn't genuflect in Karen's direction first. I walked over to her house that evening, not to yell, not to confront, but to watch. Her lights were on. Her dog was yapping at shadows. She was inside on the phone, pacing with a wine glass in hand. She looked energized. Like someone who had finally taken control of her little kingdom and wasn't letting go. And for a brief moment, I understood her. She didn't want to manage the community. She wanted to own it. Not legally, of course, but spiritually. She wanted to be the final say. The queen of quiet streets and properly aligned garbage cans. I didn't knock. I just stood there and realized something critical. She didn't expect resistance. That's why she was bold. Her whole power structure relied on people folding. On people rolling their eyes, paying the fine, and moving on. She was betting I'd do the same. But I wasn't folding. Not anymore. I didn't call the police. I didn't write a blog post. I did what scared people like her most. I got organized. I sent a certified letter to the HOA board requesting full financial disclosure of all fines collected and how they were spent, per Section 5.2 of the Community Charter. I asked for meeting minutes, member vote tallies, and a list of ratified bylaws from the past 12 months. Legally, they were required to respond within 10 business days. They didn't. Instead, I got another violation, this time for improper mailbox color. It was black. Standard issue. At that point, it was just noise. Desperate, flailing noise. And I wasn't the only one noticing. The elderly couple across the street got cited for aggressive shrub geometry. A single mom down the block got a warning for non-compliant swing set colors. A family hosting a barbecue received a cease and desist letter because their grill emitted disruptive aromas. She was lashing out. Wide net. More control. But every time she sent a new notice, it weakened her position. Every made-up rule, every forged citation, every exaggerated claim made it more obvious to everyone else what I had already figured out: she wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was punishing it. One neighbor approached me after I watered my lawn. She tried to fine me for putting up Halloween lights before October, he said, eyes darting like he expected an ambush. Said it was temporal overdecoration. That's not a thing, I replied. I know. But I paid the fine anyway. Didn't want to deal with the hassle. He paused. Then, you're not paying, are you? Not a cent. He smiled for the first time. Good. Someone has to push back. And there it was. The shift. Karen had ruled by silence. By embarrassment. By exhaustion. But once someone stood up, really stood up, it gave everyone else permission to open their eyes. I wasn't just a guy with a hammer on a roof anymore. I was the first crack in the dam. And Karen had no idea how close she was to getting swept away. The final nail in the metaphorical coffin didn't come with a bang. It came with a binder. I walked into the next HOA meeting carrying two things: a freshly brewed cup of coffee and a neatly labeled binder titled Karen's Violations, Volume 1. A few heads turned. A few others nodded. For the first time since this ridiculous saga began, people looked interested. Karen, as always, was seated at the front, flanked by her loyal duo, Cheryl and Bob. She wore a lavender blouse, pearl earrings, and that same smug expression like she'd just single-handedly brought order to Gotham. Let's begin, she said, tapping her gavel twice, though no one was talking. Tonight's agenda includes new citations and a discussion about enforcing seasonal wreath guidelines. I stood up before she could get further. I'd like to propose a vote to audit all HOA board actions taken in the last 90 days. That got attention. Heads turned. One neighbor even dropped their pen. Karen blinked slowly. That's not on the agenda. It doesn't need to be. According to Section 3.3.1 of the HOA Charter, any member can call for an emergency audit with 3 signatures. I have 10. I placed the signed form on the table in front of her. Her hand hovered above it, frozen. That clause hasn't been exercised in years, she said. Doesn't mean it stopped being valid. A tense silence spread across the room. Cheryl shifted uncomfortably. Bob avoided eye contact. Karen forced a tight smile. Fine. Then let's proceed with transparency. I opened the binder. First page, Karen authorizes a lien on my property for $1,050. At the time of the decision, no vote was recorded, no member review conducted, and no invoice provided for appeal. That's a direct violation of Section 2.5. I turned the page. Second, HOA funds used for a curb appeal enhancement project on your personal property. Specifically, a $1,200 fountain installed without member approval or budget listing. Page after page, I laid it out. Not allegations. Facts. Documents. Screenshots. Copies of HOA checks signed only by Karen. Correspondence where she approved expenditures with no vote. Amendments pushed through without the minimum number of board members present. Fines issued with no proper citations. And on one particularly bold day, a receipt for $186 spent on a compliance-themed welcome banner that now hung in her entryway. The room shifted as I spoke. People sat up straighter. Eyebrows lifted. Someone at the back whispered something that sounded a lot like, "What the hell?" Karen tried to interrupt. "These documents are being taken out of context." "Sure," I said. "Let's bring in someone to review them. An external auditor. The HOA budget can cover it, right?" Cheryl cleared her throat. "Actually, I think an audit might be appropriate." Karen's head turned so sharply it could have caused whiplash. "I mean," Cheryl added quickly, "just to show everything's been handled properly." Bob muttered a vague agreement. And that was it. In 10 seconds, her allies turned into liabilities. The armor cracked. And when Karen reached for her gavel again, her hand shook. I sat back down. The binder stayed on the table. Heavy. Undeniable. The meeting ended earlier than usual. No vote on wreaths. No fines announced. Karen didn't speak to anyone as she left, her shoes clacking down the linoleum floor like a retreating drumbeat. 3 days later, an official HOA letter arrived in my mailbox. It wasn't beige. It wasn't taped to my door like an eviction threat. It was professionally printed and sealed. Inside was an apology. And a refund. The fines were rescinded. The lien cancelled. My roof, it said, was in full compliance with revised standards. A week after that, Karen stepped down as interim president, citing personal scheduling conflicts. A new board was elected. Cheryl didn't make the cut. Bob moved away the next month. Her house stayed quiet after that. No more surprise citations. No more zoom lens surveillance. The fountain was quietly removed one morning. The flamingo lawn ornament disappeared soon after. I never asked what happened to it. I did, however, start seeing Karen at a distance, walking her dog, headphones in, eyes forward. We never spoke again. Whatever satisfaction she once got from enforcing phantom bylaws had dried up like an overwatered potted plant. As for me, I fixed the rest of the roof. With the proper notice, of course. Just to be petty, I submitted it in triplicate, with photos, contractor estimates, and a cover letter that included a smiley face. Neighbors started talking again, actually talking. We had a block cookout. Someone brought brisket. There were no fines for unauthorized grill aromas. Kids rode bikes without reflective vests. A guy even painted his mailbox red and no one cared. Life returned to normal. Well, better than normal. And the best part? No one's called 911 on me in months.